So I'm here with Gary Chartier and his first book, The Analogy of Love, Divine and Human Love at the Center of Christian Theology. So is this based on your PhD thesis?
Not really.
No.
My PhD dissertation was about the idea of friendship, and I suppose there are small pieces of that that have made their way into this. But that was really a theological analysis of friendship. This, by contrast, is a love-centered analysis of theology. I mean, it's a kind of small-scale systematic theology organized around the theme of love. So it covers all of the traditional bases in Christian theology, whereas the dissertation really was quite specifically about friendship.
So how much do you identify with Luther and his torment?
Well, you know, I think as an adult, probably not. As an adolescent, probably more so. I think, you know, as an adolescent, as a young adult, I was pretty constantly tormented by guilt, and the theological framework that I was operating with, certainly as a child and as an adolescent, was one that made Luther's theology and the kind of response that he offered in that theology to his experience of torment quite relevant.
Why were you tormented?
Well, I just think I felt like I was confronted with all kinds of alien demands that I didn't often particularly want to live up to, and even when I did, you know, I certainly didn't perhaps do that as well as I might have.
Which demands were particularly alien to you?
Well, boy, that's a yeah. There's a lot to be said there.
I just lay that out as an easy question.
Yeah. Think about an example. I mean, I think one thing I'll say, for instance, is that I think I felt constantly, but I felt repeatedly guilty in some ways about valuing and seeking connection with people who weren't sufficiently Adventist, I think, to meet certainly my dad's exacting standards.
Which strain of Adventism did your dad identify with?
You know, I think my dad lived somewhere between kind of traditional and evangelical Adventism. I think he probably would have tended to think of himself as a traditionalist, but on the other hand, I think would have been sympathetic to some, though by no means all, emphases of the evangelicals. He was certainly much more fond of Ellen White than a lot of folks who gravitated into the evangelical world. Obviously, not your dad, but I think a lot of the people for whom Ellen White was bad news wouldn't have been people with whom my dad was at all comfortable.
Ellen White is like the Talmud for my Jewish friends who are watching this and don't know anything about Adventism. He wrote about 60 books, just as there are about 60 folio volumes of the Talmud, and a lot of laws about how you should lead your life. So Ellen White was kind of the practical lawgiver of Adventist life.
And at the same time, somebody who wrote about all kinds of doctrinal topics as well. It wasn't just practice, but also, in some cases, the minutiae of doctrinal belief as well. She covered all sorts of bases. And,
so did you feel as a teenager that you weren't right with God at times? Did you tremble?
I don't know that I trembled, but I certainly didn't feel particularly confident and peaceful about that.
But so that presupposes that you must have believed in the existence of an all-powerful, all-knowing deity.
Yeah, that just seemed sort of unquestioned, I think, probably.
And was there ever a period in your life when you did not believe in God?
I don't think so. Certainly there, I think the more you know, the more questions you ask, and the less confident you are in your own formulations. But I don't think I ever went through a period when it just seemed like, the universe was empty and I was on my own. Not for any extended period.
And have you generally believed that God was speaking through Ellen White?
Well, I think again that seemed sort of unquestioned probably when I was an adolescent, and I think I went through the experience that I think a lot of people in 1980s Adventism did, of coming to have to ask more questions about Ellen White and her status in the community as we found out more about her. And so I think that was a transitional period for me. I think the end of high school and the beginning of college, and what I hope was a more realistic picture of Ellen White than probably a lot of us had.
Because if God isn't speaking through Ellen White, then you don't have to worry so much about what she prescribes. This is breast sex.
Sure.
Like what Sister White says doesn't matter as much. And I mean, and the same thing must be applied to the Bible. Like if it's just some scribe in northern Israel, 9th century before the Common Era, who's writing, don't eat certain meats, why the hell should I listen to that scribe? But if it's God who's inspiring or directing or working through him, then it's binding. So have you always believed that the Bible is God's word?
Well, again, I think I spent adolescence and childhood probably just accepting that without necessarily thinking about it very much. I think I was encouraged certainly to take the Bible very seriously in church and at home and at school. Adventism has never been officially inerrantist, and yet I think despite the fact that there would be some official denials of inerrantism, the practice at the ground level often was very inerrantist. I think probably one thing that's refined my thinking there is the increasing realization that I've had, which I try to spell out in the analogy of love, that if we're going to talk helpfully about Christian belief, the place we have to start, wherever we end up, but the place we have to start is the problem of evil. And I don't think that's obviously just an issue for Christian belief. It's an issue for any account of reality in accordance with which there is some kind of efficacious goodness in the world. Whether it's an impersonal moral law that's operative or whether it is a personal creator who is good. Either way, understanding the connection between that ultimate reality and the fact that there is evil in the world is a huge problem. And it's certainly been one of the preoccupations that I've had as a professional theologian and a philosopher of religion for a long time. One of the things that I increasingly concluded, it seems to me, as I thought about these matters, was that no responsible theology that, no theology